So I'm going to talk about lesson 5-7. 5-7 deals with a situation where you're subtracting mixed numbers, and the fraction of the bigger number is less than the fraction of the smaller number. And so I'm going to talk about what to do in that situation. So 11 1/9 minus 3 2/3. Before I subtract these, what I'm going to do is change these to a common denominator. So my denominators are 9 and 3, and I'm going to use a ladder method to figure out what the least common denominator is. I divide these both by 3, I get 3 and 1. Then I can divide this only by 1, and I make an L for least common denominator. And I get 3 times 3 is 9. That's my least common denominators. This is already in ninths. So I'm going to change the 2/3 equal blank over 9. And 3 times 3 is 9. 2 times 3 is 6. So I have to multiply the top and bottom by the same number, remember. So now this becomes 11 1/9 minus 3 6/9. I can't take 6/9 from 1/9. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to borrow from the 11 here. I'm going to change this to 10 plus 1 plus 1/9. Then I'm going to change this 1 to 9/9, because that's equivalent to 1 whole. So I just took 1 whole away from the 11. That left me with 10, and I took that 1 whole and I changed it to a fraction, 9/9. So that I can add it to 1/9. Now this becomes 10 and 10/9. So now I have 10 and 10/9 minus 3 and 6/9. Now I can subtract them. Notice this is an improper fraction. In previous lessons, when we were adding and ended up with an improper fraction, we did the opposite of this, and we said 10/9 equals 9 over 9 plus 1 over 9. To change fractions like this into mixed numbers. But in this lesson, we are doing the opposite. We want an improper fraction here because we want this to be bigger than this, and now it is. So if I subtract the whole numbers, 10 minus 3, I get 7. If I subtract the fractions, 10 minus 6, I get 4. So that's 7 and 4/9. And I can't simplify that. Well, there's another way of doing this. No, I'm not going to do that yet. So let's try it on this one. Now this has a 1 whole, or a 6. This has a 6 with no fraction next to it, minus 3 and 1/2. So you can think of this as 6 and 0/2 minus 3 and 1/2. Okay, I can't take 1 from 0, so I'm going to borrow from the 6. I get 5 plus 1 plus 0/2, and the 1 becomes 2/2. So now 2/2 plus 0/2 is 2/2, and I get 5 and 2/2. So 5 and 2/2 minus 3 and 1/2 equals 5 minus 3 is 2, 2 minus 1 is 1, 2.5. Okay? I'm going to show another way in which you just change these mixed numbers into improper fractions right off the bat, and then subtract them. A lot of kids call this the jelly bean method, from a way they learned of doing that last year. But I still need these to be the same denominator. So I'm going to find the least common denominator of 2 and 8. And I get, let me highlight that. L for least common denominator. 2 times 4 is 8. Now this already is in eighths, so I'm just going to change this one. 1/2 equals blank over 8. Well, 2 times 4 is 8, and 1 times 4 is 4. So now I have 4 3/8 minus 3 4/8. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the jelly bean method to change these and mix numbers into improper fractions, and then I'll just subtract them. So I'm going to draw a jelly bean around these numbers here, and then I just multiply what's inside of them. 4 times 8 is 32. 3 times 8 is 24. And then I add to my existing numerator. So that equals 32 plus 3 is 35. And my denominator, which is 8, stays the same. I subtract the next one. 24 plus 4 is 28. And 8 is still my denominator. 35 minus 28 is 7. And my denominator is 8. So there you go. That's another way of doing it. Now I'm going to do something kind of similar. I'm going to use cross multiplication with this instead of least common denominator to find the least common denominator, or to find a common denominator. So I'm going to look at, for number 6, I'm just going to start out looking at the fractions. I'm going to do cross multiplication. 8 times 1 is 8, 6 times 5 is 30, and my denominator is 48. So, but the thing is, I'm going to leave the denominator, I can't subtract them yet, so I'm going to leave them separate. I have 9 and 8/48 minus 3 and 30/48. So I use cross multiplication here instead of least common denominator. Now, I'm not going to do the jelly bean method on this one because I would end up multiplying 48 and 9 and 48 and 3, and I'm going to get some huge numbers. So instead, I'm going to revert to my borrowing 1 method that we did earlier. So I'm going to borrow 1 from the 9 so that this fraction is bigger than this fraction, so I can subtract them. So 9 becomes 8 plus 1 plus 8/48. 1 becomes 48/48. And if I add 48 plus 8, I get 56 over 48, and then my whole number is 8. So I have 8 and 56/48 minus 3 and 30/48. Now I can subtract everything. 8 minus 3 is 5. 56 minus 30 would be 26. And my denominator stays the same. Now this is not simplifying. I know that because these are both divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide the top and bottom by 2, and I get 13 over 24. So my answer is 5 and 13/24.